In November 2001, Andrew Bagby decided to break up with his then-girlfriend Shirley Jane Turner, who in turn shot Andrew in the back 5 times, killing him. Upon learning she was a suspect of the crime, Shirley fled to Canada. While on the run, Shirley discovered she was pregnant with Andrew's baby, but before she could give birth, Shirley was arrested and placed in jail, where she would now spend the rest of her pregnancy. In July 2002, Shirley had a baby boy whom she named Zachary. The now dead Andrew Bagby's parents were given custody of Zachary until Shirley was released from jail, where she was granted joint custody of Zachary with Bagby's parents. A few months later, Shirley walked into the Atlantic Ocean with Zachary, where they both drowned as a murder-suicide. Zachary was only 1 year old. In June 2001, Andrea Yates, a former nurse who had a history of suffering from mental illnesses, believed she had received a message from Satan telling her that she needed to kill her 5 children in order to save them from eternal damnation. Once her husband left for work, Yates filled a bathtub and one by one led each child into the bathroom, where she would drown them. Starting with her oldest son, Noah, age 7, then the second oldest, John, age 5, who was then followed by both Paul and Luke, ages 3 and 2, before finally ending with her last child and only daughter, 6-month-old Mary. Andrea Yates was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was committed to a state mental hospital. In May 2003, late one night, Deanna Lainey woke up 2 of her children, Luke and Joshua, ages 6 and 8, brought them both outside, and proceeded to smash a large rock into both their heads using all her might, killing both of them. She then went back inside to retrieve her 14-month-old baby, Aaron, and attempted to kill him using the same rock. Aaron survived, but now suffers from serious brain damage. Deanna claimed that God had told her to commit the heinous crimes, and that the world was coming to an end. Later on, she told a psychiatrist that she hoped Andrea Yates and her could meet, so they could work together as God's only witnesses to the end of the world. Deanna was also found not guilty by reason of insanity, and was committed to a state mental hospital. She has since been released, but must conform to a life of strict supervision and drug tests. Late night in October 1994, a frantic Susan Smith started banging on a door saying a man had entered her vehicle while she was stopped at a red light, ordered her to leave the vehicle, and drove off with her 2 kids in the back seat. However, 9 days after the search for her missing children began, Susan told authorities that the kidnapping was a lie she had concocted to avoid taking blame, and that she herself had taken the boys to John D. Long Lake, strapped them into the back seat, let the handbrake down, and rolled the car into the water, drowning them both. Her reasoning was that her new boyfriend had previously told her that he did not want to continue their relationship due to her having kids with another man. In July 2015, an eviction crew entered the home of Mitchell Blair and discovered that the mother had killed 2 of her 4 children and stuffed their bodies in a freezer, 9-year-old Stephen Barry and 13-year-old Stoney Blair. During the trial, one of the surviving children explained that as a form of punishment, Blair would pour boiling water on them, starved them, beat them, and even choked them, which is the cause of death of the 2 kids who passed. Mitchell herself said that while she did not intend to kill the children, she was proud of what she had done and would do it again if she had the chance. On a Monday evening of December 2011, Rochelle Grimmer had taken herself and her 2 children to the welfare office of the new Texas town in which they just moved to in order to collect food stamps. Unfortunately, Rochelle was denied the food stamps because she failed to inform the court and her former husband, whom she shares the children with, of her recent move. In a desperate attempt, Rochelle pulled a gun on the entire office and began a standoff with the local authorities, which lasted 7 hours. During the standoff, her 12-year-old daughter Rami Grimmer had made a few Facebook updates on her profile, such as "I'm bored" and "may die today." The mother ended the standoff by shooting and killing both Rami and her 10-year-old son, Timothy Grimmer, before finally ending the standoff by shooting herself. In August 2010, when Theresa Riggi was informed by her estranged husband Pascal Riggi that he will begin seeking more custody over their two twin 8-year-old boys Austin and Luke and their 5-year-old daughter Cecilia, she told him to say goodbye to his children. As an act of rebellion, Theresa climbed onto the balcony of her home and intentionally dove headfirst into the ground where she was caught by a passing neighbor. Once paramedics and police arrived, they discovered that prior to her suicide attempt, she entered her children's rooms and stabbed them all 8 times. All 3 children died. Theresa was sentenced to 16 years in prison, but was found dead in her cell 2 years later after successfully killing herself. Over the course of 13 years, Mary Beth Tinning killed 9 of her infant children, with the exception of the first child, who died in the hospital. Mary Beth would bring her newest child into the hospital claiming that the baby was having seizures. Each time, doctors would find nothing wrong with the baby and send the 2 back home, only for them to return, only this time with a dead child. It wasn't until her 9th child passed away in 1985 that authorities began to look closer at what had caused the death of said children. Police found that every time a child was brought into the hospital or passed away was when it was alone with Mary Beth. When pressured, she confessed that she would smother them with a blanket until they stopped moving. She received a 20-year prison sentence and has been denied parole multiple times. Thankfully, the next 2 and final stories contain no child killings, but the stories of these mothers are equally as crazy as the rest. In February of 2000, Kathryn Knight decided to end a heated argument with her husband John Price by stabbing him 37 times. After John had passed, Kathryn got to work. She skinned him and hung his body from a meat hook in their lounge room. She then decapitated him and put his head in a pot inside the stove. As one final act of insanity, Kathryn invited her adult children over for dinner and began cooking soup, using meat from John's body as one of the ingredients. While cooking her infamous John Price soup, a concerned neighbor had called the police and they were able to put a stop to the dinner party before any guests arrived and were potentially harmed. In 2005, Stacey Caster intentionally poisoned her then-husband David Caster with antifreeze and staged the scene to look like a suicide in an attempt to collect his life insurance money. When police began to suspect foul play was involved, they started to investigate Stacey's past and found out her first husband had suffered a similar fate. Police ordered an autopsy on the first husband and found he had ingredients in his stomach that matched the second husband's. Once Stacey became aware she was a suspect, she arranged evidence to point toward her first daughter Ashley as the murderer, despite her only being 7 years old when the first death took place. To further develop her plan, Stacey wrote a fake suicide note for her daughter that confessed to the murders. She then crushed up pills and put them inside multiple drinks to cause Ashley to OD. Luckily, Ashley survived and was able to testify against her mother, who is now serving 25 years in jail for first-degree murder and attempted murder.